Okay, so I've been digging through all the material you shared. Lots of interesting stuff on, getting things done, what actually makes success happen.
Right. There's definitely a lot out there on the topic.
There is. And it feels like, oh, we need to cut through some of the noise maybe. For this deep dive, I really want to get to the heart of it.
Sounds good. Where do you want to start?
Well, this one story really jumped out at me. The painter, Degas, right? He was complaining to the poet, Mallarmé.
Oh, yeah.
About what?
About writing poetry. He was saying, I've got all these great ideas, but the poems just aren't working.
Ah, okay. And Mallarmé.
Mallarmé apparently just said, my dear Degas, it's not with ideas that one makes verse. It's with words.
Oh, that's sharp.
Isn't it? And that just,
Turkeys.
it perfectly sums up what we're looking at today, I think. It's the work, the actual doing, not just the thinking about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That distinction is, well, it's critical. We can have brilliant ideas, truly innovative concepts floating around.
But getting them out into the world, making them real, that takes effort. It takes, the craft, the labor, it's transformation.
Exactly. And all these articles, these different takes on work ethic, on facing challenges, they all seem to orbit this same idea.
They do.
So look, this isn't going to be just another, hey, work is important chat. I think people get that, conceptually at least.
Sure.
We want to unpack what that really means, why that consistent push is so crucial, and also tackle this other thing that pops up in the sources, ego.
Ego.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a big one. It can really get in the way, can it?
Totally. So the mission here is find those aha moments, those practical insights, without just dumping a load of information,
Yeah.
especially for listeners wanting to learn quickly, efficiently.
Right. It's moving beyond just knowing work is needed to really appreciating the process and spotting those internal roadblocks like ego before they trip us up. It's the difference between planning the building and actually laying the bricks.
Okay, so back to Degas and Mallarmé for a sec. It's more than just ideas versus words, isn't it? It's about taking something internal
Private, yeah.
and making it external.
Yeah.
Making it something that exists outside your own head. Paul Valery had a great line about this too.
What was that?
He said, a poet's real job isn't just to feel poetic. That's their own business. The job is to use their work, their craft,
The words.
to make others feel that poetic state. It's about production, about creating something.
That nails it. There's a clear line between, let's say, the product of the mind, the pure idea, and the product of labor and industry. That's where the idea meets the real world, meets resistance, and has to be shaped.
Which makes me think of Henry Ford. Pretty blunt guy.
What did he say?
You can't build a reputation on what you're going to do.
Huh. Direct, but true.
He's so obvious, right? But man, how often do we get caught up in the plan, the vision? Almost feels like we've done something just by thinking it up.
It's incredibly seductive, and that connects to what Nina Holton found in Csikszentmihalyi's Mahali's study on creativity.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, she was talking about sculptors. That initial germ of an idea, she said, it just sits there.
Right. Doesn't magically become a statue.
Exactly. The next stage, the essential stage, is, quote, the hard work. Shaping the material, whatever it is, stone, words, code.
Yeah. And Ben Horowitz, he's always pretty direct too.
The hard thing about hard things, guy.
That's him. He says the really hard thing isn't having the big dream. It's the grind. It's dealing with the mess when things don't go according to plan.
The consequences.
Yeah. The vision is clean, maybe. The actual work is messy, relentless.
So here's a question then, maybe for the listeners too. We all know work is needed, but have we really absorbed how much, how continuous it has to be?
That's a good point. It's not like a single burst of effort.
No. One source really stressed that it's ongoing, like a marathon, not a sprint. And maybe the finish line keeps shifting?
And that's where the whole 10,000 hours idea comes in, though maybe the exact number isn't the point.
Right. The number itself isn't magic. It's the principle behind it. It's the continual effort, the patience.
It makes mastery feel accessible. Not just for some genius few, but for anyone willing to put in that consistent time.
Precisely. But that's also where ego pushes back, isn't it?
How so?
Because the idea that it's mostly about sustained effort, well, the ego hears that as, wait, you mean I don't already have what it takes?
Ah, right. It feels like a criticism.
Exactly. And the uncomfortable truth, as one source put it, is often exactly right. You don't. No one does. Not right off the bat. It's built.
Our ego loves the idea of being instantly brilliant, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It wants the applause now. It wants the fun parts, the recognition.
Without the grind, without the hours of, just doing the work that isn't glamorous.
It looks for shortcuts. It wants thinking to count as doing. But
Yeah.
that source nailed it. Where we decide to put our energy ultimately decides what we'll accomplish.
So time spent just thinking about it or talking about it.
Is time not spent actually making it happen? Ego prefers the illusion.
Okay, let's ground this with some examples. The sources mentioned a young Bill Clinton.
Right, with the note cards.
Yeah, before he was, Bill Clinton, he was apparently building this massive network. Handwritten index cards for everyone he met. Thousands of them.
Meticulous, following up constantly.
Not exactly thrilling work, maybe, but that long-term, consistent effort clearly paid off. Building relationships brick by brick.
What's powerful there is the proactive nature of it. He wasn't just waiting for stuff to happen. He was laying the groundwork deliberately over years.
Okay, different kind of example. Charles Darwin.
Ah, the ultimate long game.
Decades working on his theory of evolution. Apparently, he held off publishing for ages because he wanted it to be absolutely right.
Imagine that. Years and years, mostly in private. No guarantee of recognition, just driven by the work itself.
How do you maintain that internal drive, keeping the ego out of it when you're working alone for so long?
It really highlights that intrinsic motivation, doesn't it? His reward wasn't fame, initially anyway. It was the understanding, the discovery itself. That takes serious resilience.
Which brings us back to that core question, maybe. Do we love the work, the process, the practice, even when it's hard?
Or is it more about the idea of success, the external validation, the quick hit of attention?
Are we in love with the destination or the journey? Maybe that's too cliche.
No, but it's relevant. There are those old Latin phrases, fac, si facis.
Amy.
Do it if you're going to do it. Basically, commit. Don't just talk about it.
Okay.
And the other one, materiam superabat opus.
That sounds familiar.
The workmanship was better than the material. The idea is we don't control our raw talent, our starting point,
Right.
but we absolutely control the effort, the skill, the workmanship we apply to it.
That reminds me of Bill Bradley, the basketball player who became a senator.
Oh, yeah. What about him?
He apparently had this mantra when he was young. When you are not practicing, remember, someone somewhere is practicing, and when you meet him, he will win.
Wow. Intense.
Yeah, but it speaks to that unseen effort. You can't just turn it on when you need it. That preparation, or lack of it, eventually shows. Like the Bible verse about trimming your lamps, being ready.
That constant dedication. Bradley's whole career seems to embody that, moving from sports to politics. The results of unseen work eventually become visible.
So we really need to ditch this romantic idea of effortless genius, right? This notion that brilliance just pours out on demand.
It's a complete fantasy. A damaging one, maybe. It's just, well, it's a lie, isn't it?
Yeah, and it feeds into that whole fake it till you make it thing.
Which is tricky, because in some ways confidence helps, but
But in a world where it's so easy to project an image, how do you tell what's real? And as one Thor's pointed out, you really don't want your surgeon or your pilot faking it.
definitely not. There are areas where competence is just non-negotiable. You can't fake being a good quarterback or a bull rider for very long.
Right, so the goal isn't to get good at faking it. The goal is to actually become the person who doesn't need to fake it.
How do we do that?
Well, the sources suggest seeing every act of focused work, every time we choose the hard thing over the easy distraction, as delaying gratification, passing the marshmallow test, basically, making an investment in our future selves.
I like that framing. Each session of real work is an investment, building genuine capability, not just a facade.
Okay, but let's be real, that work is often lonely, right?
Yeah.
It's not always fun.
No, definitely not always fun. It often involves struggling, pushing through blocks, ignoring distractions.
And the distractions aren't just, social media. They can be internal too, like getting puffed up by a little bit of praise or even just congratulating ourselves too early.
That's exactly where the ego is the enemy idea comes in so strongly, especially for what comes next.
What do you mean, what comes next?
Well, maybe ego helps get you started. It can feel like confidence, like audacity, but it makes this kind of Faustian bargain.
Okay.
It gives you maybe a short-term boost, but it undermines the long-term foundation. It whispers things that lead you astray. And like the source said, nobody looks back at a life well lived and says, man, what a great monstrous ego that person had.
Huh. Good point. It's not an admirable quality in hindsight.
No. And this ties into Ira Glass's concept of the taste-talent gap.
Explain that one.
It's the idea that, especially when you start out in a creative field, your taste is actually pretty good. You know what excellent work looks like.
Right. That's why you got into it.
But your own initial work, Well, it sucks. It doesn't measure up to your taste. There's a gap.
Yeah, that's a painful place to be.
It really is. And that's where ego can offer this false comfort. It tells you, no, your stuff is actually great. Those critics just don't get it.
So it leads to bluster, defensiveness, avoiding honest feedback.
Exactly. It prevents you from seeing the work clearly and doing what's needed to improve, to actually close that gap.
So the alternative is humility.
Yeah, humility. Looking honestly at where your work falls short, seeing the gap not as an insult, but as, well, as the path forward.
A roadmap for the work that needs doing.
Precisely. It's about accepting the critique, internal or external, and getting down to the business of bridging that gap through practice, through learning, developing the habits.
Which brings us back to the potential dangers of ego when success does start to come. Like those examples used, Lance Armstrong or Barry Bonds.
Right. Huge talents, huge success. But ego seems to have played a role in convincing them that the ends justified the means.
Taking shortcuts, believing the rules don't apply, maybe. Or that winning is the only thing that matters.
Ego whispers that everyone else is cutting corners, so you have to too, just to compete. It inflates the importance of the win above the integrity of the process.
But the counter-argument from the sources is that real ambition, the sustainable kind, is quieter. It's quiet confidence.
Exactly. Resisting the crutches, the shortcuts, committing to the long game, even if it feels like a lonely fight sometimes. Sticking to your own standards.
Being authentic, doing the work properly, even when no one's watching.
That quiet confidence comes from knowing you've built something real, something earned, not something propped up by deceit or shortcuts. That's a deeper satisfaction.
And this loops back nicely to that Sherman example one source used.
Earl Sherman.
Yeah. His earlier career wasn't always seen as glamorous or high profile. Lots of different roles, some setbacks.
Okay.
But that period, that seemingly less direct path, was actually building the foundation. It developed his patience, his logistics skills, his leadership, stuff he desperately needed later.
So the unglamorous work was actually the crucial preparation.
Exactly. It shows how that foundational work, done with humility and diligence, prepares you for bigger things. You can be audacious in your aims, have big goals.
But stay humble about where you are now and respectful of the work needed to get there. Play a different game.
Right. So, wrapping this up, thinking about everything we've discussed, the message seems pretty clear.
What's the core takeaway for you?
That real achievement, the kind that lasts, it's not magic. It's not usually a lightning strike of genius. It's built methodically, consistently.
Through that oft unglamorous day-to-day work.
Yeah, and that ego, man, it's always lurking, isn't it? Ready to tell you you're too good for the grunt work, or that you deserve shortcuts, or that your ideas alone are enough. It can sabotage the whole thing.
It really can. Which leads to a final thought, maybe something for listeners to chew on.
Okay, let's hear it.
Thinking about all this, where specifically in your own life or work could shifting the focus, shifting it away from just the idea or the desired outcome and more towards the daily process, the actual work, where could that make the biggest difference?
It's a good question.
And maybe a follow-up. How can you consciously, practically guard against those little whispers of ego? The ones that want you to skip the reps or take the easy route or get defensive instead of learning. How do you stay focused on the work itself?